Now, in your handout, on the back of your handout, there is a, I think it's labeled perpetuating factors. Got it? Good. So we can see here that these are all factors that are involved. Let me see if I have that slide in here. I don't. Okay. So one of the ways that we think about insomnia is we think about everybody having kind of a pre-existing, pre-morbid level of arousal. And then usually there's some kind of a precipitating event, and that will oftentimes throw you into poor sleep. Slowly the effects of that wear off, but we start doing things, perpetuating factors that make it worse. And this is a table of a variety of perpetuating factors. We've talked about some of these already. You know, you were talking about how you nap, and you can look here, the napping D-primes that sleep homeostat. Now, I think the current kind of thinking about insomnia in general is that it is predominantly an issue of that sleep homeostat not working, that it gets dysfunctional. And so by compressing, what we're doing is priming it, setting it to work, and then going back to normal sleep. So you can see that if you sleep in, or if you go to bed early, what you're doing is setting it up so that the next night you don't have as much sleep. That you're trying to stretch that sleep opportunity out. So that 85% of your time in bed should be sleep. That's another way that you can determine. You know, if you keep pretty accurate records through the week, if your sleep is below 85%, then you need to decrease your time in bed. And if it's above 85%, then you need to add some time. Okay? So you go down here a little bit, you can see that, you know, if you drink a cup of coffee at bedtime, I'm hoping none of you do that, but certainly that creates a fair amount of arousal and can really interfere with that. And if you get into the habit of doing that, or if you get into the habit of, you know, I'm really tired at 6 o'clock, so I'm going to have a double shot at 6, and that way I can get stuff done. But boy, you're going to bed. It's tough to be going to bed, right? A really common kind of thing that I see is when people are really tired, when they've had a bad night's sleep, they don't exercise that next day, then they're not going to bed. They're not going to bed with as much sleep debt or as much, and that creates one. So that's a real common precipitating event, but it's also a pretty common perpetuating factor. Okay. So you can go through these. The other thing that I would like to point out, a lot of people end up using alcohol to help fall asleep. In small amounts, that might be helpful, but if you get too far, it also disrupts. That's one of those drugs that does decrease the amount of slow wave sleep. So even if you sleep a long time, you don't get as restful a sleep when you've had too much alcohol. And so that's a part of the hangover. It's not all of it, but it's a part of it. That you're sleep deprived, and so we tend to try and not use alcohol, or at least not alcohol in very high quantities. When I'm talking about that, I wouldn't do more than a glass of wine a night, and I would try and do that even somewhat before bedtime. The book on marijuana in research is really divided. Some people it really helps sleep, some people it really cranks up and prevents sleep. When we take people off of marijuana, we have some people who sleep better, and we have some people who sleep worse. So we really don't know quite what's going on there. The thing with over-the-counter sedatives or over antihistamines or any kind of medications is that you get very dependent on them, not so much physically but psychologically. So you need that, you know, Benadryl to fall asleep, and you run out. You're really anxious about not having the Benadryl, and so you create the opportunity to not fall asleep. Most hypnotics are only approved for about 2 weeks use, and I think that beyond that they start getting habituating in that way. And that same kind of thing is true for any kind of behaviors. You know, if you come to believe that chanting before you fall asleep helps you fall asleep, then you start to get that association. So if you don't chant for whatever reason, now that's a hard one to know why you wouldn't, or couldn't at least, but you start to build up that association. So there's lots of things. And we're going to talk some about associations now as we move on. Any questions?
Melatonin, taking melatonin at night, you know, the actual melatonin, does that interfere with? Because I've taken that before and it felt like it worked.
Yeah, there's some research that suggests that a small dose at bedtime can help. There's other research that suggests that a small dose a few hours before bedtime can help set your circadian clock. The research is pretty mixed. And so it's complicated. The challenge right now is that what we're talking about dose-wise is very small doses compared to what's out there on the market. And what's out there on the market is huge amounts of it, far more than what your body produces. And I think that, you know, for some people it works to put them to sleep, but it's not clear what you're doing when you're putting that much of even a natural hormone in your body. So. Okay, other questions?